Hey, everybody out there in podcast land, welcome to the latest, the greatest episode of Sports Frenzy 2.0, taping here on March the 8th of 2023. Of course, this will hit, as every weekly episode does, Thursday morning. This time around, that would be March the 9th. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. As always, glad to have you aboard for this weekly extravaganza. Conquistador taking some time off, well-earned, well-deserved, hanging out at a casino, I believe, is what I've been told. So, nothing inappropriate going on, believe me. Dave is the last guy who's going to spend all of his sports frenzy money gambling. So, just taking a couple days with Mrs. C and having some fun. Good for him. So, yes, you are stuck with me going solo this week, but that does not mean we do not have a lot to talk about. Now, this episode could almost be called The Calm Before the Storm. Next week, we will have NFL free agency in full swing. Next week, we will have brackets as March Madness gets underway in college basketball. So this is kind of that lead-up episode, that lead-up week, where we do have a little bit of news when it comes to signings in the NFL, a little bit of news when it comes to college basketball. But of course, next week will be the big stuff, the major headlines. So hope to have the Conquistador back with me for that. But let's start off with NASCAR this week. Finally into the regular season. Full steam ahead. 3 races in, with our picks for race 4 from Phoenix coming up in a few minutes. Last Sunday was Las Vegas. And I have to say it, boring race again. The Pennzoil 400 from Las Vegas. Not the most exciting of races. There was only one incident involving the pole sitter, Joey Logano. Bad news for our panel members, Dave and Doug, as they had picked Joey Logano for the Vegas race, and Dave is just having a brutal start to our Frenzy Cup year, our contest, where we pick a driver each and every week, and Dave has not had any good luck whatsoever here. I think this is the worst start anybody has ever had in the decade-plus run we have had with the Frenzy Cup. Through 3 races, and I'm not picking on Dave, believe me. We have all had bad runs, but this is extraordinary. We score each week just like NASCAR does with the drivers. Dave has got 3 picks in, 3 races in. He has got a grand total of 13 points. Again, I feel for him. I have never seen anything like this. Even last year with Sam, where he basically quit because he did not see how he was going to qualify for the Frenzy Cup playoffs. Sam had a better start last year than Dave is got going right now. So, again, I feel for him. Joey Logano, again, starts off on the pole. You think he's going to have a really solid race. Not a lot happens on the Vegas track in terms of incidents. It's more about tire management, tire wear. But he got 3 wide, and he was the one that ended up getting bashed into the wall. And again, really the only driver out there for the entire race who had a major incident, and he finishes last. Yes, he went from first to last. Now, the Hendrick Chevys dominated. William Byron wins the race. Kyle Larson finishes second. Alex Bowman finishes third. And you might ask, what about Chase Elliott? Why didn't they go 4 for 4? Well, that was the major headline in the Cup Series this week. And this will spur debate. Chase Elliott injures his leg, breaks his leg, while snowboarding. Had surgery last Friday, March the 3rd, 3 hours of surgery. Josh Berry substituted in the number 9 Napa Chevrolet for Las Vegas. Right now, estimates are Chase Elliott will miss at least 6 weeks, since there is not an off week until June. That means 6 races minimum. Of course, he's already missed Vegas. And yes, of course, because NASCAR loves to bend the rules, they're talking about easily granting Chase Elliott a waiver, which means that he will not have to finish in the top 30 in points in order to qualify for the playoffs, but he will still have to win a race to get in. If he can't win a race, he will not make the playoffs. There has been a precedent set for this. Tony Stewart, years and years ago, has a similar issue with an injury not on track during a cup race. And he got the waiver. So, of course, again, popular driver. I don't see any reason down the road here once we get into the summer months, if that leg heals up properly and doesn't affect his driving ability, Chase Elliott should easily win a race, which would put him in the playoffs. Now, we mentioned Josh Berry substituting for Chase Elliott for the Vegas race. So, for the time being, Josh Berry will be the permanent, quote-unquote, substitute for Chase Elliott on all oval tracks. However, we do have a road course coming up. COTA, Circuit of the Americas, is coming up, I believe, about 3 weeks from now, 2 to 3 weeks from now. It is after Atlanta. So road course specialist Jordan Taylor will be in the number 9 Napa Chevy for that one. Now, when I alluded to the fact that this is a big discussion point, what I'm trying to get at is, where does the responsibility lie for an athlete? And yes, I am counting race car drivers as athletes, just like I count golfers as athletes. Of course, not as physically demanding in many ways as other sports. You can argue mentally just as taxing. But when you have the kind of promise as a young athlete that Chase Elliott has got, he's already won a cup title, multiple race winner. Still, a career, we're looking at, 15 years probably minimum, well into his 40s. Of course, NASCAR drivers right now, currently, mid-40s is about when they call it quits. Used to be they could push it into their early 50s. Somebody like Mark Martin, of course. But now it seems like it's settled down a little bit more into the mid-40s. We know Kevin Harvick's calling it quits this year. More on him in a little bit. But Chase Elliott, as young as he is, he's got 15 years left in his career to establish himself as one of the best Cup drivers of all time. And yet he goes out and does something like this, the snowboarding, and everybody's trying to make excuses and say, oh, he knows what he's doing. He's been doing this for years. He's an expert level snowboarder. I don't care. If I'm Rick Hendrick or I am the owner of a football team, if it's a football player or a basketball franchise, take your pick. If it's an individual, a golfer, a tennis player, that's hurting them directly. We've heard, of course, stories in the past of Tiger Woods and his car accident and how that has decimated his ability to play golf at a high level. But that was his dumb decision, his dumb choice. And I still think to this day there's something hinky that went on there. But in the end, he can drive when he's falling asleep, quote unquote, and getting a wreck and tear up his leg. It's not really in the end hurting anybody but him. Yes, there are people that depend on him as caddy. He's got sponsors. But when we're talking about somebody who's part of a team, and yes, NASCAR drivers are part of a team. In the end, it doesn't affect the pit crew. The pit crew is still going to get paid. There'll be a substitute driver, as we mentioned, Josh Berry, Jordan Taylor, whoever that might be. But what does Napa think about this? Is Napa happy about this? They signed on thinking that they were going to be at the front of the pack most weeks with one of the top 2 or 3 drivers in the sport behind the wheel of their car. Now we're looking at probably, again, 6 weeks, I would say 2 months, where Napa is really not going to be running all that well in that number 9 Chevrolet. And we just saw it here with Josh Berry. Josh Berry's not ready to run at this level. And it showed at Vegas. So where does the penalty come in for the reckless behavior of the athlete in the off season or even during the season? And I know a lot of people I've talked to, friends of mine, have given me pushback on this already and said, you've got to let these people, especially younger people, live their lives. And again, if it was only directly impacting them, I'd say, sure, they make choices. If they're dumb choices, they suffer 100% of the consequences if things go south. But there are other people involved. If it's a team sport or there are sponsors involved. You guys debate it. I think it's wrong. I think these guys, when you're at a top level like a Chase Elliott, and believe me, we've got an NBA story coming up in just a minute that will help prove my point. Can't you, when you're gifted with this kind of opportunity, this kind of ability, and you're already getting millions upon millions of dollars, can't you just tone it down for a decade? I know we get one life, and that's it. We don't get do-overs. But don't you owe it to your family? Don't you owe it to the team, the owner, who gave you the opportunity? Don't you owe it to them to maybe dial it down a little bit? And then once you are in your 40s, you've retired from football, you've retired from racing, you've retired from basketball, then go nuts. Go snort cocaine with a bunch of hookers and do whatever the hell you want. But when you are beholden to a team, an owner, I'm not saying wrap yourself up in bubble wrap. Things happen. But when you put yourself in reckless situations, and I'm sorry, snowboarding in the middle of the Cup season is a reckless situation, there should be a penalty. There should be a penalty for Chase Elliott. All right, finally, before we move on to our picks for Phoenix, not the biggest news in the world, but the inaugural Chicago street course race has got a name here in the Cup Series. It will be the Grant Park 220. I believe it's 100 laps, 2.2 miles per lap. So that leads us to this coming Sunday's race, March the 12th, 2023, the fourth race of the Cup season, the United Rentals 500K in Phoenix. Now, of course, this is also the track that hosts the championship race as of late. So to me, you kind of got to look at it two different ways. You got to look at how these cars have performed recently in the spring race versus how they perform in the fall race. Not only, the weather situation might not be that much different, but you've got to look at the fact that the fall race is a championship race. You have already basically set aside 4 drivers, and you've told everybody, stay away from these guys. Don't mess up their chances of winning the championship. So when I look at the numbers, I take that into account. So initially, I was leaning towards Joey Logano. Of course, he won the Phoenix race and won the championship here this past fall. But again, how hard was everybody else outside of the other 3 who had made the final cut in the playoffs? How hard were those other drivers really racing him? Now, that being said, Bill and Doug, yes, is going back to back after last week's disappointment at Vegas. Bill and Doug go with Joey Logano. 7 of our 8 panelists have their picks in, by the way. I'm going one last time with Mr. Reliable. Even though it's his last year, he is known to dominate Phoenix. Not so much lately, but still very consistent. Really almost a lock for a top 10. That would be Happy Harvick. Kevin Harvick for me. And Sam, the elder statesman, agrees. So Kevin, Sam, go with Kevin Harvick. Dave, I mentioned the abysmal start so far to his Frenzy Cup season. He's taking Kevin Harvick's teammate, Chase Briscoe. Might not seem like the best pick, but if you look at the numbers, Chase Briscoe has actually run very, very well at Phoenix. And finally, Nick and Aaron are going with Ryan Blaney. So there you go, kids. 7 of our 8 picks, as I mentioned, in for United Rentals 500K at Phoenix. And that'll do it for NASCAR. So let's move on, as I mentioned. Talk some basketball here. And kind of tie in the whole topic of Chase Elliott, whether you want to say that his snowboarding accident was reckless behavior. Again, we can debate, we can discuss. I think it is. A lot of people I know don't think it matters. Now we move on to the NBA and the story of Ja Morant. And I alluded to this last week, and I said this story was coming. But I wanted to wait. Wanted to get more information, and of course, in the last week, Ja Morant ends up adding to the story with more, again, reckless behavior. Here recently, going back to, let's say, mid-2022, these are the issues we've had with Ja Morant. Of course, the young superstar for the Memphis Grizzlies. We've got stories of his entourage threatening staffers from the Indiana Pacers with lasers. We've got stories of Ja Morant personally, along with his entourage, threatening the security chief at a Memphis mall. We have got stories of Ja Morant punching multiple times a teenager and brandishing a gun. And then the latest, again, which came up here within the last week, which prompted, depending on who you believe, the NBA, the Grizzlies, Ja Morant's camp, prompting him to leave, to step away from the team for at least 2 games. Last weekend, he was out and in a nightclub being videoed. And again, brandishing a gun in a nightclub, strip club, on video. And of course, the NBA is investigating the situation. Dun, dun, dun. Adam Silver is a pussy. And I hate to use that word, but that's what he is. He is he looks weak and he is weak. As Dave and I have said multiple times on this show, he lets the inmates run the asylum. And yes, I don't care if you think that's politically incorrect to say. You should know by now, this show is not politically correct. Adam Silver gets walked over by China, by his own players. He'll bully owners, though, if the owners do something wrong. And nobody's saying the owners aren't worthy of discipline or being forced to sell their teams when they do something egregious. But let's have the same standard for everybody in the league. Owners, players, maybe even some of your sponsors overseas. So again, like I said, an informal 2-game leave. They're not even calling it a suspension for Ja Morant. Of course, he just signed a mega extension with the Memphis Grizzlies. So financially, he's set. Maybe that's what's emboldened him. Maybe that's what's making him think he's bulletproof. And I don't mean that as a pun. Now, I have heard, again, I have no faith in the NBA. I have no faith in Adam Silver to do the right thing, to do the proper thing. But I have heard that if the NBA's investigation concludes that, yes, he has been brandishing guns in the video as well as to the teenager he assaulted, he could be looking at a minimum 50-game suspension. Let's be honest, the NBA doesn't have the balls to do it. They don't have the guts to do it. But again, this comes back to the point we were talking about with Chase Elliott. Where is the penalty? Where is the karma to come back? The penalties, the suspensions, where does it end with the bad behavior with these athletes? When do we start holding them accountable for said bad behavior? When do the owners, when do the leagues start doing it? And it just leads to more and more disenchantment from fans like me, hopefully from fans like you, where we want to change. And we don't expect our athletes to be choir boys or choir women or whatever. Nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. But I'm not going around brandishing guns. And I am not putting myself in harm's way, snowboarding, jumping on a motorcycle, if I am in line to make tens of hundreds of millions of dollars as a professional athlete. Again, I could be walking down the steps at a house, at a building, and break my ankle. But that's not reckless behavior. That's just an everyday accident. I'm not putting myself in a situation where I could jeopardize my income as an athlete. We'll have more on the NBA coming up, of course, as you could guess, at the end of the show in the Red Foreman Dumbasses of the Week. But before we close the book here on the NBA and close out segment one, I do want to point out some people think this is a positive thing. Some people think this is a feel-good moment. But this almost reeks of giving everybody a trophy. And Dave and I talked about this when it was first announced months and months ago. But it became official last night. Again, we're taping here on March the 8th, 2023, where the Lakers retired Pau Gasol's number 16. He becomes the 12th Los Angeles Laker player to have his number retired. And if you've seen any of the video, you've seen the clips of the ceremony, and nobody's ripping on Pau Gasol as a person, even as a player. And of course, the connection he had to Kobe Bryant and all the wonderful things he said about Kobe Bryant's widow and Kobe Bryant's children. Genuine, heartfelt, fantastic moment. That's not the issue. And I'm not trying to take away from those special moments. But from a purely analytical standpoint, a fan standpoint, and I'm not a Lakers fan by any stretch, but seeing that number 16 go up and seeing it up there with Kobe Bryant and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Magic Johnson, I'm just shaking my head thinking, Pau Gasol gets his number retired? Sorry, Pau Gasol is not an all-time great. I'm sorry, for the Lakers or for any team or in the NBA in general. But especially for the Los Angeles Lakers, one of the, if not the most prestigious teams in the NBA, Pau Gasol gets his number retired. Sorry. Not liking it, not buying it. And I'll be interested to see if they retire LeBron James' number someday, considering he's been a mercenary jumping from Cleveland to Miami to Cleveland to LA. And yes, I know Kareem started his career with the Milwaukee Bucks. But again, Pau Gasol, I can see LeBron James, in a way, being more worthy of it, even though he's only got the one title. He was the de facto leader of that team for that one title, whereas Pau Gasol was with Kobe Bryant. Just, it doesn't sit right with me. Again, this is like participation awards, where we're letting everybody in. And I've talked about the Hall of Fame, especially in football. But even baseball's getting bad, letting people like Scott Rowland in. You guys discuss amongst yourselves. Reach out, leave a comment on our podcast page, or, of course, you can always do it on our Facebook page. But that'll do it for segment one. Coming up in segment two, going to give you the previews for next week, which means the NFL, free agency coming up, college basketball, March Madness starting up here soon. I'm the Maestro, and I will be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you tired of the boring sports analysis you get from the major outlets? If so, join the Maestro and the Conquistador for a riveting discussion of all sports topics on Sports Frenzy 2.0. Available on Spotify, Google, Apple, and wherever podcasts are available.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. Sports Frenzy 2.0 here. March the 8th, 2023, of course, hitting Thursday morning, March the 9th. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane, flying solo this week. And of course, this is the time each and every week where we let everybody know where you can find Sports Frenzy 2.0. Of course, you have found us somewhere, but you have options. You can hear Sports Frenzy 2.0 on Spotify, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and Audible. And of course, don't forget to check out our Facebook page where you'll find links to our weekly NASCAR Cup Series picks, links to this podcast, not only the Thursday morning sports edition, but the Saturday morning weekend edition. Of course, the weekend edition, your Friday night hangover cure, where we talk about movies, music, TV and streaming, pop culture. This weekend, I will be reviewing the new Godsmack album, Lighting Up the Sky. Also be reviewing a little-known movie based on a short story by my favorite author, James Lee Burke. The movie stars Thandaway Newton. It is called God's Country. And then we'll also be talking about Poker Face, as we do each and every week, as season 1 of Poker Face is coming to an end. 10th episode airing on March the 9th on Peacock. Also, Perry Mason has just started season 2 on HBO. And the much anticipated Hulu debut for History of the World Part 2. Of course, decades and decades and decades ago, Mel Brooks did History of the World Part 1. I do believe that was his last major motion picture, and that goes way, way back to the beginning of the 80s. So we will have all of that for you. Well, I will. This coming Saturday morning. But let's get back into sports. As I mentioned, going to talk about NCAA basketball. Of course, the conference tournaments are in full swing right now. Some of the smaller ones have already wrapped up. Of course, the automatic bids go out to the champions. So that's where we get the Cinderella stories, the smaller schools. Now, here as I tape, the big boys are starting to get involved. Of course, most of the top teams in the country get buys in their respective conference tournaments. So really, when we get into Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and early Sunday, that's when we find out which teams are going to come in with momentum. You know, if one of the top teams in the AP poll gets knocked out of their conference championship tournament early, that could hurt their seeding, dropping them from a 1 to a 2 or a 2 to a 3. And of course, we've got to all start doing our research now for our brackets. And of course, next Wednesday night, when we tape the next episode of Sports Frenzy 2.0, we will hopefully have most of the panel's brackets in for you. Of course, there might be a straggler or two who will wait until the last possible minute before the first game on Thursday tips off, which is, of course, when the tournament itself, the big dance, starts for sure. We get the first 4 Of course, we'll report on that and tell you the results of the first four next Wednesday night. But Thursday, a little bit afternoon, Eastern Standard Time, is when the big dance really kicks in. So, a little bit of news here on the NCAA basketball front, of course, outside of the anticipation for the final selection Sunday show, the brackets, and all that good stuff. We talked about the possible controversy surrounding the all-time men's NCAA Division I scoring record. And we pointed out that Detroit Mercy's Antoine Davis had a shot at catching Pistol Pete Maravich. Now, as of right now, Pete Maravich's scoring record of 3,667 points stands as Detroit Mercy got knocked out of their conference tournament, and Antoine Davis ended up 3 points short of Pistol Pete's record. But there is a catch. And again, this is why we were trying to let you know that there was going to be some controversy coming on this. Not just if Antoine Davis had actually gotten the record last week, but now there is a chance that Detroit Mercy could extend their season. And if they do, any games they play in the College Basketball Invitational would count for Antoine Davis towards his overall total scoring mark. So he would only need 3 points to match Pete Maravich, 4 to surpass him. So the question is, will Detroit Mercy, and they do not have the best record in the world, does the CBI invite them? Of course, the headlines that the tournament would garner having Antoine Davis and Detroit Mercy in there would maybe let them overlook the bad record of the team. Now, there is a fee involved as well, and we're talking smaller schools here, so I'm not mocking Detroit Mercy by any stretch. But I believe it's a $50,000 entry fee to get into the College Basketball Invitational once you are invited. So they're going to have to look at their budget and decide, is it worth it? I would imagine they would do it. I would imagine they would go ahead and do it. But again, that's going to just cause all of this controversy that we discussed last week when it comes to Antoine Davis versus Pete Maravich and who is the true all-time men's NCAA scoring leader. You got to look beyond the numbers. We talked last week. You've got to look beyond the numbers. And I do think Mike Davis, Antoine Davis's father, who happens to be the head coach of Detroit Mercy, has handled this very well. And he said, let's just look at it as they're both the scoring leaders. Maravich for his generation, Antoine Davis for the current generation. So then, as we do each and every week, of course, real quick, we're going to talk about the teams that we follow. Here locally, Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish, have one of their worst years in men's basketball in recent memory, finishing 11-21, knocked out already of the ACC tournament by Virginia Tech. And, of course, locally, They're making a big deal. That was it for Mike Brey, who is the winningest head coach in Notre Dame men's basketball history. He did knock off, at the time, number 25 Pittsburgh in his final home game as the Fighting Irish head coach. So he's got that to hang his hat on. But of course, after the game, local media here made a big deal about he went out to the legendary linebacker lounge and did shots. Wow. What a guy. What a party guy. What if anybody knows the history, the last couple decades around here with Mike Brey as head coach of the men's basketball team, if you've seen him on television and how he presents himself, not bothering to shave, not bothering to present himself as a professional. And of course, there are rumors and innuendos circulating around the community. They have been for a long, long time. Him going out and doing shots at the linebacker in the first time. I believe he claims it's the only time he's ever been in the linebacker. Whatever. No direct accusations, but I'm telling you, the program is better off without him, better off moving on. And a lot of things get swept under the rug when it comes to Mike Brey and his off-the-court behavior. And then, of course, my Miami Hurricanes still holding on, playing well, number 14 in the last AP poll, 24-6, and they get the number 1 seed in the ACC tournament. I believe they split the regular season title with Virginia, but they get the number 1 seed due to tiebreakers. We'll see with Miami. I am cautiously optimistic. I'm not anticipating any kind of a miracle, a Final Four run. I could see them, if they finish strong in the ACC tournament, maybe getting into the Sweet 16. But I just don't know, as great as Jim Larinaga is as a head coach, if this Miami Hurricanes squad has got what it takes for a Final Four run. I hope so. But after dealing with the football team and all that drama here for the last decade or so, and the constant disappointment, I think they've poisoned me on the basketball team. Karma's a bitch, kids. I got to enjoy all those football championships with the Hurricanes through the 80s, through the 90s, into the early 2000s, and now I'm paying the price. Now it's getting to the point where I can almost say I am a long-suffering Hurricanes fan, despite all of the success they had for about 20 years when I was growing up. One little note in college football before we move on to the NFL. UCLA happy enough with Chip Kelly, where they've signed him to an extension through 2027. Not necessarily a mega deal like you see with a Nick Saban or a Kirby Smart or a Dabo Swinney or even a Jimbo Fisher, who didn't deserve it. But Chip Kelly at least has made UCLA football relevant again. They look to be a perennial top 25 program. So Chip Kelly will be around with the Bruins at least in terms of getting paid, through 2027. Now we move on to the big boys, the NFL, and of course, same thing with what we just discussed with college basketball. This is the calm before the storm. This is the precursor to the big news, the big week of headlines. As the combine has now wrapped up, by all accounts, the big mover is Anthony Richardson, the quarterback coming out of Florida. Everybody's enamored with his physical tools, his skills. He's a raw talent. But now people are saying he's easily going to be a top 10 pick, and there's a chance, however slight it might be, there might be somebody out there willing to pay the price to trade with the Bears in that number one slot and move up to get Anthony Richardson at number one. Of course, before the draft, though, we've got to worry about free agency. We just had the deadline pass yesterday for the franchise tag. Handful of guys, including Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, and Evan Ingram, were all tagged by their respective teams. Of course, the big tag was Lamar Jackson getting the non-exclusive franchise tag from the Baltimore Ravens. They have tried for months and months and months to come to some sort of an agreement on a long-term deal. Now, of course, Lamar Jackson and his mother representing Lamar's interests. There is no agent involved, which, of course, to me is a big mistake. I get it. Why do you want to give that kind of percentage of your money to somebody? But there is a reason why. These people are professional negotiators. And we'll get to that with Daniel Jones in just a second. But the debate, is Lamar Jackson worth 180, 200 million guaranteed? Of course, rumors are out there that he wants a deal matching the ridiculous, insane contract, fully guaranteed contract that the Browns gave Deshaun Watson, which I believe was $230 million, fully guaranteed. And again, you have one stupid owner who destroys the market for everybody else. And that seems to be what happens in the major sports. One crazy owner destroys the economic structure for the entire league. Now, I'm not giving Lamar Jackson that kind of money. I'm not. Especially because I firmly believe he quit on the Ravens last year because he didn't get his way and didn't get his contract. So, oh, my knee hurts. I'm not going to play for you. I'm not going to play in the playoffs and jeopardize my career. If Michael Vick is coming out and saying, suck it up, Buttercup, I had the same injury and played through it. If Michael Vick is telling you you're a wuss and you're a baby, then you're a wuss and you're a baby. There's no way I would trust Lamar Jackson, especially with the type of money that he wants. And it's interesting because the minute it seemed like Baltimore slapped the non-exclusive franchise tag on Lamar Jackson, which means, by the way, other teams can negotiate with Lamar Jackson. The Ravens have the right to match any offer. And if they don't, and Lamar goes to the other team, the Ravens will get 2 first-round picks as compensation. And there were immediately teams saying, we're not in, we're not in. Surprisingly, the Atlanta Falcons said, nope, we're out. The Washington Commanders, nope, we're out. I believe the Raiders, nope, we're out. Just very weird how a handful of teams immediately said, we don't want anything to do with this. Is it because of the first-round picks? Is it because Lamar Jackson is demanding too much guaranteed money? We will see. Of course, we're still waiting on Aaron Rodgers. Jets fans salivating, thinking that they, by far and away, have the best shot at landing him. Again, why? And I know we get excited about this as football fans, basically in any sport, whether it's baseball, free agency, basketball, free agency. But I'm telling you, everybody went crazy about this class of available quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, and of course Derek Carr signs with the Saints for 4 years. Reports saying $150 million with $100 million guaranteed. Geno Smith stays with Seattle 3 years, $105 million. Supposedly getting $52 million in the first year. And then, of course, Daniel Jones, who switched agents here within the last 2 or 3 weeks. They take it right to the edge, take it right to that tag deadline. And again, reporting, clean up the language, people, okay? Because I was so confused when the numbers came out on this. 4 years, $160 million, $82 million guaranteed. That I all get. But then the $35 million in incentives, I could not find anybody to clean that up for me and tell me, is that on top of the $160 million? Or are we looking at 4 years, $125 million, and then the incentives could kick it up to a value of $160? Because to me, it makes a lot of difference. Haven't got a ton of clarity on it here over the last 24 hours, but it does seem like that $35 million in incentives is on top of the $160 million. Wow. And of course, we heard that the new representation for Daniel Jones wanted 45 to 48 million a year. I mean, this market for quarterbacks has gone crazy, stark raving crazy. Will there be an end in sight? Will we ever see an end in sight? Again, does Lamar Jackson warrant more money than Daniel Jones? Yes. And I'm saying this as somebody who just told you I wouldn't sign him. The Geno Smith deal, the Derek Carr deal, maybe a little bit more reasonable. But again, the escalating numbers with these quarterbacks and these teams panicking. Scared to death. We can't let Daniel Jones go. We can't let Derek Carr slip through our fingers. We can't let Geno Smith go. Why not? And that's the big point I was trying to get at here, is that this entire class, Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, Carr, Smith, Jones, they don't impress me all that much to the point where I am going to commit 4, 5, 6 years and that big of a piece of my salary cap pie to those guys. And I actually think Baltimore is being the smart team here. I really do. Remember, they drafted Lamar Jackson at the very back end of the first round. And if they get 2 first-round picks from another team and let Lamar Jackson go, who's to say they either can't find another diamond in the rough late in the first round, or they can't use those picks to move up and get one of these 4 young quarterbacks who are all projected to be top 10 picks this year. And what's to say they can't go get a Jimmy Garoppolo or a Ryan Tannehill to fill the gap in until they do get to draft a quarterback they're more comfortable with? There's been a lot of talk about resetting the quarterback position. And I think that is going to be the new norm until these quarterback salaries come down to a reasonable level. That's why there's rumors, although I don't think they're going to come to anything, rumors that the Bears could possibly trade Justin Fields to quote-unquote reset the quarterback position. They can have their pick of the young guys coming out of college, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis. They could have their choice of any of those guys and buy themselves 2 more years before they have to worry about giving out a mega deal. Because what happens here after next year, Justin Fields either gets his 5th year guaranteed, and or you have to give him a massive extension if he plays well in 2023 and 24. And again, I wouldn't be impressed as an owner, as a GM, going crazy for any of these quarterbacks. The Daniel Jones one is just by far the most ridiculous. Again, if that is a $40 million deal per year plus the $35 million in incentives, to me, that's ludicrous. That is ludicrous. So what is Joe Burrow going to get? What is Justin Herbert going to get? And the Bengals and the Chargers are stuck. Because unlike these other quarterbacks we're talking about here, who just recently cashed in, those guys are better. They're younger and they're better. And they're looking at these deals and they are laughing. They've got to be laughing and going, oh my God, I'm looking at 55, 60 million a year. Especially Burrow. Burrow's already been to 2 AFC championships and 1 Super Bowl. And this is why nobody outside of the ultra filthy rich can afford to go to see a game live. And then finally, here, one last little tidbit of knowledge for you before we wrap up segment 2. A very shrewd move by the Jacksonville Jaguars, under the radar move last year, is coming to fruition now, as they traded for the Atlanta Falcons' young receiver, Calvin Ridley. Remember, he had issues and problems back in the 2022 season, the 2021-22 season. Did not play 2022-2023. He was suspended for gambling. Remember, he left the Falcons for personal reasons, and then the gambling situation came to light. Well, he's been reinstated, and he is now going to be, along with Christian Kirk, a very formidable 1-2 receiver combo for Trevor Lawrence. And I don't see any way any way anybody takes the AFC South away from the Jaguars here in the foreseeable future. All right, kids, you know what's coming up in segment 3. Moments of silence, Red Foreman, dumbasses of the week. I am the Maestro. I'll be right back. Are you tired of getting body slammed by the mainstream sports media? Are you sick of their lame trash talk? Check out Sports Frenzy 2.0 with a tag team of the Maestro and the Conquistador. Pile drive those jackasses into submission. Available on all major podcast hosts, including Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Breaker, Apple, Overcast, and Castbox. Kevin Dave, slap a figure 4 on all the major sports networks who lie, kiss ass, and refuse to take names. New episodes drop every Thursday with new weekend edition episodes every Saturday. And that's the bottom line, because Sports Frenzy said so. All right, everybody, time to wrap things up here. Sports Frenzy 2.0, Wednesday night, March the 8th, 2023. This will, of course, hit Thursday morning. Every Sports Frenzy 2.0 sports episode hits Thursday morning. This one will hit March the 9th, 2023. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Segment 3, sometimes segment 4 when we're in football season, but the final segment each and every week, of course, we cover the miscellaneous headlines, and we'll get to moments of silence. And we do have, of course, a few Red Foreman sports dumbasses of the week to discuss. But odds and ends here as we clean things up. Baseball, we've got spring training going on, of course. The World Baseball Classic, if you care about it, has begun. I don't. Really not much else in baseball. If Dave were here, we'll save this for him for next week if he wants to talk about it. But he and I have been discussing here recently the issues with White Sox pitcher Mike Clevenger. Domestic assault allegations, I believe child abuse involved. Well, again, I don't know. The sports scales of justice don't seem to have any kind of consistency or logic with all the accusations, all the things that have been documented involving Mike Clevenger. There will be no discipline handed down from Major League Baseball. And again, a discussion point, as we talked about earlier with Chase Elliott and Ja Morant, or in the NFL where we talked about what are these quarterbacks really worth. I just want to compare and contrast what Trevor Bauer went through versus what Mike Clevenger is going through. And again, I know Trevor Bauer was defiant. Trevor Bauer was fighting things and saying that the incidents involving him were consensual. But it still boggles my mind. It's not just baseball. We've seen the inconsistencies when it comes to discipline with Roger Goodell in the NFL, and of course Adam Silver, the big weenie, in basketball. Where it just depends on which way the wind's blowing, what day of the week it is. If you bring the hammer down or you just tap them lightly on the shoulder and scold them and say, "Don't you do that again." Again, we'll see next week if Dave wants to comment, since the White Sox are his team. But I have a feeling he is not happy about having Mike Clevenger on the White Sox this year. Another topic that normally would be in the conquistadors' wheelhouse is hockey. Of course, last week we talked about Patrick Kane being traded away, the end of an era for the Blackhawks. Blackhawks currently, as we tape, 22, 36, and 5, 49 points. Barely hanging on ahead of, I still believe it's Columbus Blue Jackets for the worst overall record point total in the NHL. Now, on the flip side of that, the Boston Bruins this past week became the fastest team ever to post 100 points. Took them 61 games to get to 100 points, beating the previous record set by the 76-77 Montreal Canadiens. Took them 62 games to get to 100 points. But keep in mind, like we talked earlier about the Antoine Davis versus Pete Maravich scoring record in Division I basketball, there are things to consider. Changes between generations. If you go all the way back to 1976 and 1977, you have got to keep in mind how they calculated points. Little bit different than what the Bruins get now. And I believe, of course, it all comes down to getting that point for an overtime or shootout loss. Whereas I do believe the Canadiens back then did not get those extra points. But still, it is going to be a tall task for anybody. Carolina, the Rangers, anybody in the NHL to knock off the Boston Bruins. Novak Djokovic, luckily for him, the U.S. Open does not happen for quite a while yet. Late summer, of course, in New York. But arguably the second most prestigious tournament in America is Indian Wells. And Novak Djokovic cannot participate because as of this taping, he is still not allowed into the United States because of his COVID vaccination status. Boy, I thought we were beyond this, but what I'm hearing is April, possibly in April, barring, of course, some kind of a setback or outbreak, the U.S. will ease the restrictions. So hopefully Djokovic will get to play in all 4 tennis majors this year, because we talked about this last year on Sports Frenzy, how unfair this is, how this is manipulating the tennis records, the all-time records, because Djokovic was getting denied entry into countries to play in the majors while Rafael Nadal, was allowed to play. And yes, I know it's a personal choice, and you have to suffer the consequences. But again, I am not a big fan of forcing people to do anything. So hopefully this will end here soon. Like I said, April is what I'm hearing. And finally, sports will be restored to their full level of normalcy. Novak Djokovic can continue to battle Rafael Nadal for that all-time Grand Slam title crown on the men's side. All right, moments of silence. We've only got one this week. It is somewhat significant in that we're dealing with a tarnished yet very important figure in recent history when it comes to the NFL, an owner, the founder of the Carolina Panthers. Of course, I still kind of look at them as an expansion franchise, even though they've been around for quite a while now. Jerry Richardson, Panthers founder, passed away here this past week. Just like with all these controversies, we were just talking about the Clevenger versus the Bauer situation. And I'm not going to get into the weeds, and I don't have the time to get into the weeds on all these individual stories and find out exactly what alleged improprieties these men perpetrated. That's what the mass media gets paid for. I'll sort out the information once they get it and pass it along. But of course, Jerry Richardson supposedly had a hostile work environment as the owner of the Panthers and was forced to sell the team in shame to, is it David Tepper, I believe is the current owner of the Panthers. I believe that's the guy in charge right now. I apologize for not being 100% sure. I sometimes get the guy who replaced the disgraced Panthers owner confused with the guy who replaced the disgraced Clippers owner, Sterling. So I know David Tepper's one of the two, either the Clippers owner or the current Panthers owner. But nonetheless, Jerry Richardson has passed away. Now, what I'm going to do here to wrap things up, call it a day. Of course, Dave and I instituted an award here a couple months ago to try to pass along a little bit more positivity, trying not to be so negative all the damn time. Now, it's been hit or miss, whether it's here on the sports edition or on the weekend edition, whether or not we can actually find some good stories, some feel-good stuff to pass along to you. Now, the interesting thing is here, I do have one Clint Eastwood Badass of the Week. Yes, that is the award that Dave and I came up with. I am going to do a combo badass and dumbass. But before I get to that, I do have a couple true awards to give out in terms of this week's Clint Eastwood Sports Badasses of the Week. First up, I want to give kudos, props, and credit to Kennesaw State, the basketball team, the men's basketball team. They won the Atlantic Sun title here recently. They get a Clint Eastwood Badass of the Week award because in 2019 and 2020, that season, Kennesaw State, the men's team, was 1-28. Yes, 1 win, 28 losses. This year, 2022-2023, As I mentioned, they won the ASUN title with a sterling record of 26-8. You want to talk about a program doing a turnaround within just a few short years. Kennesaw State goes from 1-28 to 26-8 in winning their conference championship. Kennesaw State, you guys are badasses. Now let's see if you can become Cinderellas in the big dance coming up in a week or so. USC's Andrew Voorhees, no relation to Jason. At the NFL Combine this past week, Andrew Voorhees tore up his ACL at the Combine. But that did not stop him from showing off his strength. There's video of this out there. You have got to check this badass out. Andrew Voorhees jumped on the bench press with a massive brace on his knee. Again, after tearing his ACL at the Combine, would not go home, would not call it quits. Andrew Voorhees jumped on the bench press, pressed 225 pounds 38 times, 38 reps at 225 pounds. That, my friends, is a true Clint Eastwood badass of the week. Now, transitioning to, or as Dave would say, pivoting to the Red Foreman dumbasses of the week. Only got a couple, but they're going to take a few minutes to discuss. Now, number one, I told you that I've got a combo here. So let me give you the dumbass in this situation first. Now, you can say this is hateful, spiteful. Obviously, doing sports commentary, doing a sports podcast, maybe you would be in some ways justified in pointing that out. I cannot stand sports reporters, sports commentators. Everybody makes mistakes, don't get me wrong. Everybody stumbles over their words, especially if you're doing a basketball game for 2 hours nonstop or a football game for 3+ hours with very few breaks. You got to fill every second, every minute when the mic is on. I get it. But there are a lot of former athletes, especially, who have no business being in sports broadcasting. They can't put two sentences together. They sound like they've barely got a 4th grade education. But because they're a former player, ESPN, CBS Sports Network, Fox, FS1, whoever it might be, cannot wait to throw money at them and say, oh, come on and be in our studio show. You've got to know what you're talking about. They could know how to play the game, but if they cannot enunciate their knowledge properly for audiences, they have no business being on these shows. But of course, we got to fill content. You got to have First Take and Colin Cowherd and Jim Rome and all this stuff out there, filling up time on all these sports networks. And that leads me to one stupid, dumbass beyond belief, ESPN's Kendrick Perkins. Kendrick Perkins, of course, was a moderately decent basketball player in his NBA days. But if you have ever subjected yourself to Kendrick Perkins and how he talks, he sounds like an idiot. And we're not even talking about this particular instance we're going to call him out on, but just in general, Kendrick Perkins does not sound like he got out of grade school. he is a moron and he is a dumbass. But now he takes things one step further to become a Red Foreman Dumbass of the Week here on Sports Frenzy 2.0. Kendrick Perkins insinuates, and when I say insinuates, he did everything possible he could but come out and straight up say this. Kendrick Perkins insinuates that Nikola Jokic is winning MVPs right now in the NBA because he is white. And again, we will never, ever get beyond this until people like Kendrick Perkins shut up and go away. Because the last thing we need are ignorant takes like this. And I believe firmly, whether you want to believe it or not, if you're a liberal snowflake or you're an ultra-conservative, all I know is if we want true equality, we need to start talking about the fact that racism exists everywhere. White, black, white, black, Jewish, Asian, black, Hispanic, black, whatever it is, whatever combination you want to throw together. Racism exists everywhere by everyone in every group. Kendrick Perkins is a racist. He is a nasty, awful racist for saying this, for insinuating this. Now, my third Clint Eastwood badass of the week, following up on this, is J.J. Redick. And I have never been a fan of J.J. Redick. He said some really dumb stuff, but at least J.J. Redick can enunciate, can put coherent sentences together, and get his thoughts out there where you can understand them. Whether you agree with them or not, that is a different topic for a different time. But good for J.J. Redick. He is my third and final Clint Eastwood badass of the week because he came out directly speaking to Kendrick Perkins and said, you are saying that you think the white voters who vote for the NBA MVP are racist. And of course, Kendrick Perkins can't come up with an appropriate response. All he can do is kind of say, no, I didn't, no, no. J.J. Redick persisted and hounded him and basically said what I just said. He is a racist. So good for J.J. Redick for having the guts, having the balls to confront racism head on. Because again, racism comes in every way, shape, form, creed, and color. It's not exclusive to one race against all the others. And then finally, Patrick Mahomes has got to do something about his family. Recently, we talked about his wife demanding apologies from anybody and everybody who didn't pick the Kansas City Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, which is idiotic in and of itself. But of course, we know about his brother and the stupidity of his brother Jackson Mahomes. He's done some dumb things in the past, but this, my friends, is egregious, criminal, borderline criminal, depending on if charges are pressed. Jackson Mahomes is accused of assaulting a waiter and the female owner of an Overland Park, Kansas restaurant. If you read the details of the story, of course, he had to have his entourage with him, his boys with him, just like Ja Morant. And again, how cowardly are you? How cowardly are you? Be a man. Put the gun down. Tell your friends to back off. You want to confront somebody, go mano a mano. Throw down with a person one-on-one. Don't pull out a gun and don't expect your boys to help you so you go 6-on-1 or 7-on-1. You're a coward if you do that. It's not a show of strength. It's a show of cowardice. And then on top of this, of course, as I mentioned, not only did Mahomes and his entourage push a waiter who was trying to intervene, is my understanding as I read the story, but Mahomes and his entourage forced their way into an office in the sub-level of this restaurant, the owner's office, and Jackson Mahomes forcibly kissed this female owner not once but twice, talking about how great of a team they could make together. This is a spoiled brat who was never told no. And I blame the parents. And we all know this Mahomes situation. It's a shame because by all accounts, I have never really heard of anything negative about Patrick Mahomes. But his parents, his wife, his brother, they all act like they are the privileged ones because of what Patrick Mahomes has accomplished. You know, the mother has almost come out and said she has a magical vagina because she gave birth to Patrick Mahomes, the greatest quarterback of all time. The entitlement of family members and parents because of the accomplishments of a sibling or a child will never cease to amaze me. Pride is one thing. Being proud of the accomplishments of your child or your brother or your sister is one thing entirely. Yes, support them, encourage them, be proud of them. But forge your own path. Find your thing. Find your expertise. Find your skill. And you go out and succeed on your own. And you've already got a step ahead. You've already got resources probably that have been shared with you or you can access from your successful family member. We've seen this. We've talked about this on the weekend edition. The latest craze is calling these young Hollywood celebrities who have famous parents Nepo babies. Nepotism. Cannot stand nepotism. Hate nepotism. Just like I hate any kind of a quota, any kind of a hiring number you put out. Affirmative action, whatever you want to call it. Hire the best people for the job. Don't fill a quota. And don't give a job to somebody's kids just because they're famous and they're influential. The kid might have zero talent and you're excluding somebody else who doesn't have famous parents, who's 15 times more talented. But Jackson Mahomes, Brittany Mahomes, they are getting afforded opportunities that we would never have because of the fame of Patrick Mahomes, yet they are pissing it away on social media in bad behavior. Jackson Mahomes is a Red Foreman dumbass of the week. And that'll do it. Glad you hung out with me here for an hour and a half as we talked about the week in sports. And as I mentioned, the Conquistador will rejoin me next week for March Madness, our brackets. We will pass those along to you next Wednesday night. And we will also discuss all the free agent signings in the NFL. Will we have a resolution with Lamar Jackson in a week? Will we have a resolution with Aaron Rodgers in a week? Fun stuff, kids. Had a little bit of a lull there, of course, post-Super Bowl, but things are gearing back up again. So we'll have plenty to talk about here in the coming weeks and months. Don't forget to check out the weekend edition every Saturday morning wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. We'll talk to you next week. See ya.